Good morning, everyone. Hope everybody had a great week. As you can tell, I'm not at the church building recording this on a little family vacation down in Puerto Rico. So enjoy the scenery around me. You also may notice some different noises and things going on around me. We just can't control our setting. So you might hear a dog, you might hear some interesting music. So just don't be too distracted by it. Anyway, I'll remind you guys, first Sunday, February 7th is coming up. We're going to be doing pizza for a meal afterwards. So we're going to be buying it. So you can bring some money and you can throw it in a donation jar when you come. It's February 7th. So just don't forget that. So now let's jump in. I want to jump into, I want to continue on in talking about preparing for increase, but also as we're talking about preparing for increase, last week I talked about stewarding what we have presently in our midst. I use the illustration, I'm going to use it again today. We're going to talk about illustration of the snow-capped mountain with the three rivers. Remember the first river, for the man lived on the river, and all three rivers were fed by the snow cap above. The first river, the guy continued to build a dam higher and higher to catch all the water because he was afraid he would never have enough, and so he continued to build higher, and so nothing ever. He consumed everything that came into his house. So not a drop of water got by. The second one was on the second river. He built a dam, and he'd catch most of the water. He'd let some water go downstream, but he'd catch most of the water, and he always knew that his passions, his wants, and his desires, what he thought he needed, was always increasing, and so therefore he was capturing most of everything that came down because he wanted to use it for his ever-growing desires. I guess, and one on the third river, which is the one who looked up at the mountain and said, "God's my source." He is. That snow-capped mountain has never not ever had snow on it, and my river has never run dry. Even though at times it may have slowed its flow, it's never run out, and there's always been plenty. And so his experience is that it'll never run out. And so what he has done is he continues to build canals from his river to people who are not on the river, and he redistributes all of his resources that way because he fully trusts in the Lord. The Lord is his provision. He was his source. So today, and I talked about last week, and I hope everybody did their homework. Remember, your homework last week was to go into your personal finances, open your checkbook up, open up when I say checkbook, go online. Probably nobody uses a checkbook anymore, hardly. Go online, look at your accounts, look at everything, see where all your money's going, what's it being spent on, so that you can understand where your resources are going. And so last week I was in Matthew 6. I'm going to reread the last part of 6 because I wanted to talk about this week about the spirit of mammon, or how the spirit of mammon or the god of money enslaves us. And so I want to talk about that, but I'm going to reread this verse. Matthew chapter 6, verse 24, it says, "How could you worship two gods at the same time? You will have to hate one and love the other, or be devoted to one and despise the other. You can't worship the true God," talking about Yahweh, "while enslaved to the god of money." Or literally, if you look at it in the translation, it's literally a spirit of mammon. And so so what Jesus is writing here, he's saying that there's two opposing things. And what would have happened in this culture, in this setting, was Jesus is writing about the god of money. He's talking about how they would have worshipped this Canaanite god called Mammon, and they would worship it, and it would control everything about them. And so it had to directly tie to how they worship and how their finances were. So Jesus was writing here, and he's saying you can't worship one God himself or the spirit of man. You can't worship both. So today we're going to talk about maybe some indications if we're being influenced by the spirit of mammon. Now, let me go ahead and clear something up. All of our decisions in life regarding money, our finances, are not directly related to a spirit. In other words, the spirit of mammon is not running your life. But there, Jesus is very clear as he goes through Scripture when he's dealing with spiritual things. He will call out. He'll call out a deaf spirit, a mute spirit. We have a spirit of fear in 2 Timothy 1:7. And so you have different things where Jesus has defined what a spirit's actually doing based on what it is. So a deaf and mute spirit talks about not being able to speak, and a spirit of fear brings fear. And so these spiritual things exist, but we have authority over them. And there's not a demon behind every bush or under every rock, but they are present and active, and they are influencing. So today I want to just kind of open up 10 different things have to do with being influenced by the spirit of mammon. Are we being controlled by our money? Or are we controlling our money? Are we being controlled by things that we think we should have or things that we don't have? Or are we being controlled by the Lord himself? Are we being controlled by what he provides for us, that he's our source? So we're going to jump in today. I'm going to identify 10. Okay, and I'm going to be pretty quick with these, so I'm not going to be exhaustive. They're just 10 quick ones. And then out of this, you can begin to form and say, which one of these do I need to address first? Okay, so 10 influences. The first one, number one, is worry and anxiety over money. So this is simply put, if you are always anxious about money, you're worried about money, you're worried that there's not going to be enough money, you're anxious about spending money because you're afraid if you spend this money you won't have it to do anything else with. It's always up in your emotions. In other words, your money is all the way up in your emotions all the time. So with that, it creates worry. You're never at peace. You're never at rest. You're wondering where your next paycheck's coming from. All this is wrapped up in this worry and anxiety over money. So that's number one. Number two, money mismanagement. This just simply talks about the fact that we're not keeping up with where our finances go. Do you know where your money goes? So in other words, do you know how much you spend on coffee in a week? Do you know how much you spend on groceries in a week? Do you know how much you eat out in a week? Like, do you literally look and go, I know if you actually knew what you spend at Chick-fil-A in a week or a month. Those numbers mean something. And in all of this, as we're going through it, this is the second one, money mismanagement, is everything has to have a purpose. We have to purpose our finances, because without purpose, then condemnation can come in and guilt can come in on how we handle our finances. With a purpose, we're free to spend, but without purpose, then I think we get sloppy. So, number two is money mismanagement. We just simply don't know where our money's going. Number three, consistent financial lack. And so basically, I don't have enough money. I have too much month left at the end of my money. So meaning that our paycheck, if you get paid once a month, by the time you get paid once a month, you're still making up for part of what happened in the month before. And by the time you get 3 weeks in, you're going like, I don't know how we're going to make it to the end of the month. And so this consistent financial lack is number three. It's just something that continues to show itself, because you're going like, it just begins to reveal where we've actually mismanaged our money at. So number three, consistent financial lack. Number four, I can't afford it, quote, quote, mentality. The mentality that says, I just can't afford it. And really is, sometimes we say, I can't afford it, in order to, it really means I haven't budgeted for it. I haven't budgeted for it. It's like we'll say, I can't afford it in order to say that's the reason why I don't buy it. If I could afford it, I would buy it. And so this goes back to our purpose in our finances. It's not that I can't afford it. A better statement is I choose not to buy it. Or I would like to buy that, so now I'm going to budget my money so that I can purchase that. And so if we're not budgeting our money and stewarding our money, then we'll walk around and give an excuse saying I can't afford something, as opposed to saying, no, I don't really want that, or I would really like to have that, so I'm going to steward my finances and I'm going to save up. I mean, how many of us actually will save a whole year to purchase something, apart from just going out and putting it on a credit card and saying, well, I'll just pay for it next month? So the I can't afford it mentality we need to come up with, we just need to come up a way of going like, it's not that I can't afford it, I choose not to purchase it right now. And that puts us in control of our finances, not the spirit of mammon going, hey, you really need that, but you really can't afford it, but you really need that, but you really can't afford it. So, all right, number 5, impulse buying. Simply the inability to resist the desire to purchase something, just straight impulse buying. Again, this is shopping without a purchase. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of us will medicate by shopping. I had my mom, she passed away back in 2014, and I loved her to death, but I can tell you what, she was the best. She knew how to medicate by impulse buying. She was the best impulse buyer, hands down. Literally, we'd have to freeze her credit cards. I'd have to take credit cards away from her. We'd literally have to freeze her credit cards to where she'd have to thaw it out in order to even read the numbers, to even punch them in order to order something from QVC online. And again, impulse buying, this is all has to do with heart issues. See, this is the spirit of mammon operates in our heart. That's why we go back to Matthew chapter 6, verse 24, where it says, you can't worship two gods at the same time. And Jesus is talking about this whole passage about where our treasure is, there our heart will be also. And he says in 6:21, for your heart will always pursue what you value as your treasure. And so wrapping this back into the impulse buying thing is we're trying to medicate or fulfill something, and Jesus is saying there's no way you can continue to serve me and also serve that. Because my mom could run up credit cards and she'd finally get everything paid off. Everything paid off. And I would be on her all the time about it. And the credit card bill come in next month. Well, I just saw that go on sale. It was just on sale. It was just a great deal. I had to buy it. I had to get that. It was the best deal ever. I've never seen it that cheap before. And so these are the kind of things that kind of revolve around the fact that our hearts are being controlled and we're medicating with purchasing things. So, number 5. That was number 5. Number 6. I'm going to put 6 is stinginess. We just don't want to give. You're fearful to give. You're afraid to give. You're going like, I can't give this. If I give this, then I will not have enough and I'm just going to keep it. You're afraid to tithe regularly, and you're afraid if I get this money, like you just received all this money, and if, gosh, I received $1,000, tithe is 10%. We're going to talk about that in a couple of weeks. $100, like I don't know if I can give $100 back to the Lord. Like, how do I? And if you get $10,000, that's $1,000. How can I give $1,000? Like that's a lot of money. Like I could be doing something else with that. And so, those type of things begin to happen when we're stingy with our money. And these are indicators. Listen, these are all heart positions. They're all places that you have to test your own heart out and go, is this me? Is this exemplifying me? And if it is, then we need to go in and begin to go like, what do I need to do to overcome this? Okay, stinginess, number 6. Number 7, greed. just that you have this crazy desire to just acquire and possess more, just continually, more and more and more, just more. You got to have more. And Jesus talks about this in Luke. If you want to, flip over to Luke chapter 12. And, again, I told you last week, Jesus spoke about finances more than he did anything in the New Testament, more than he did about faith, because he knew that our finances would tie our heart up. And if he could get to our heart and untie that, then he could get to us. And so he knew, he knows us, he knows how we are. And so that's why he wrote it that way. He said, I'm going to write about this because I know this is what's going to tie their hearts up. So simply greed, number 7. So Luke chapter 12. Go to verse 13. Actually, go down to 16. He's going to go ahead and give us the illustration. 13 is the beginning of the passage. 16, Jesus then began to give this illustration. I'm in the Passion Translation as well. So, a wealthy landowner had a farm that produced bumper crops. In fact, it filled his barns overflowing. He thought, what should I do now that every barn is full and I have nowhere else to store more? This is what he says. He says, I know what I'll do. I'll tear down the barns. I'll build one massive barn that will hold all my grain and goods. Then I can just sit back, surrounded with comfort and ease, and I'll enjoy life with no worries at all. Then verse 20, God said to him, what a fool you are to trust in the riches and not in me. This very night, the messengers of death are demanding to take your life. Then who will get all the wealth you have stored up for yourself? This is what will happen to all those who fill up their lives with everything but God. So simply Jesus is saying, hey, if you're greedy, that means you're actually not generous. And it means you're not looking around on how to distribute. And it means that you're trusting in your finances, you're not trusting in me. And honestly, when we're greedy, we don't know when enough is enough. Number 8, discontentment. Always discontent. And so Paul says this, because we think money or more resources will make us happy or to make us more content. Literally, it just allows us to purchase more things that we have to steward and manage, and they break more, and then we're more frustrated about it in the end of all that. But if you turn to Philippians chapter 4, verse 11, Paul is talking about contentment. This is what he says about contentment. He says, I'm not telling you this because I'm in need, for I have learned to be satisfied in any circumstance. And literally, I've learned to be content in any circumstance. I know what it means to lack. So Paul says, I know what it means not to have a lot, and I know what it means to experience overwhelming abundance. For I'm trained in the secret of overcoming all things, whether in the fullness or in hunger. And I find that strength in Christ's explosive power influences me to conquer every difficulty. Listen, Paul says, he says, for I'm trained in the secret of overcoming all things, whether in the fullness or in hunger. And I find that the strength of Christ's explosive power influences me to conquer every difficulty. Paul said he was trained in this, his life trained in it. If you'll understand, our life is training us on how to actually, it's training us on how to be content. It's training us when have challenge in our resources, and when we have a lot and we have a little, it's training us in order to know how to operate and be content. And so allow those things to train us and train our hearts, because it's all about our hearts. That's number 8. Now, number 9. Bondage to debt. So you might be influenced by the spirit of mammon if you're in bondage to debt. So in other words, Psalm 37 says the wicked borrows and doesn't repay, but the righteous shows mercy and gives. And so when we're in bondage to debt, it means that we're spending more than we make. And it means we continue to spend more than we make. If you go back to that Leviticus passage in Leviticus 23:22, it talks about not harvesting all the way up to the edge of your field and not picking up the gleanings that you drop, and not using everything. It's talking about actually distributing things. And so therefore, you're actually purchasing what you can have, not trying to have more than you can purchase. This is what happens when we're in bondage to debt, is when we try to purchase and continue to buy things more because we feel like we need stuff. And that's that spirit of mammon operating, saying, you need this in your heart. You need this to operate. You need this in order to live your life. You need all these things. And this is what the spirit of mammon is creating, this tension in our hearts. And that's why Jesus is getting back at it and going like, hey, what do you value? What you value, what you treasure will be revealed based on how you use your money. And so that's what he's talking about when we're in bondage to debt. So number 10, we're exaggerated emphasis on money and overestimate of its true power. Again, number 10, exaggerated emphasis on money. In other words, we emphasize money, like money, got to have money. Money is a great deal. Money is a big deal. And an overestimate of power. In other words, we say money has power. It's great. And so when you can begin to pick this up in people's lives, when they begin to talk about, oh, I got to get a new job. I got to get a better job. It's nothing wrong with getting a better job to make more money. I need to have more money here. I need to have more money here. There's nothing wrong with having more money. It's, again, back to our heart posture. How is it in our heart posture that we carry ourselves and the money doesn't control us? It doesn't control, we control it. And that's the whole thing that's happening behind the spirit of money, or mammon, and trusting God, is that we're trying to let it not control us. We are trying to control it. So, this is what I want to close with. I want you to do some homework this week. I want you to go through this list, 1 through 10, and go through that list. And I want you to sit before the Lord and go, okay, Lord, last week I sat with you and I got inside my finances. I began to open them up. Because, Lord, I want to prepare for increase. I want to steward what I have, but I also want to prepare for increase in my life. And so, therefore, I know how I'm spending my money now. What's motivating me to spend money? Is the spirit of mammon influencing me? Are these things characteristic in my life, and are they beginning to show up? Do they show up in places behind me? Are they in my heart? Are they moving things? And go through that, because listen, any demonic spirit, anything that's influenced us, we have authority over in Christ, right? And so we can break that off. You can go in there and go, Jesus, in Jesus' now just break off the influence of the spirit of mammon. And then you can go, I confess, Father, that I have chose poorly. I've worried about money. I've worried about my finances. I'm not worried anymore. I'm going to have faith. And I'm going to make better choices. And so I'm going to create a plan to make better choices. I'm going to close my budget up. I'm going to close all my finances. I'm going to understand where everything's going. And I'm going to begin to operate in faith. In Jesus' name. So you can do it just that way. But listen, when we begin to deal with this, we can't just, okay, I want to break off the spirit of mammon. Then there's choices and decisions that have to be made out of that in order to keep the ground that you want to take. So in other words, we make choices, and there are things and reasons why we chose the way we choose, and there's reasons why we spend the way we spend. So we have to go back in there and look at our heart and go, okay, what's in my heart? What place in me is deficient that I'm trying to medicate? What is there that's actually messing with my finances and making me make bad decisions? And that's what we want to get to. So in those 10 things that indicate you might be influenced by the spirit of mammon, in other words, you're not trusting God as your source. You're trusting money as your source, and you're trusting resources as your source. So go back in and dig into that this week. I want to dig into faith next week. How do we continue to walk in faith as we're trying to shift our finances? Because the biggest thing ever is we'll have to walk in faith. If you're going to shift something in your finances, it's going to be scary because you're going to actually have to trust, like the man on the third river, that when the resources, when I look up at the snow-capped mountain, when I look into heaven, when I begin to pray and talk to the Father, I had to begin to trust that the river is never going to run dry, and that it's okay for me to make good decisions and to distribute my resources and to be generous and to pay my bills off on time and not to spend extra and not to buy and be overwhelmed by my heart's desire to have a lot of stuff that actually is not part of what the Lord wants for me to begin with. So next week I'm going to get into faith. So this week, gather group leaders begin just, maybe we should pray into and just pray into, in the group, maybe have some discussion about different things out of these 10 that might be stirring around, and then begin to pray around each one another, and maybe even set up a plan for each other to walk things out. Listen, have a great week. I can tell you I've had a great week. If you look behind me, again, you see the ocean out there. You might even see a whale blowing. We've been seeing whales jump. So I've had a great week. I hope you've had a great week, and I'll see you next week.